Hey, CPG Guys listeners, PVSB here, and we want to take a minute to tell you about something that Shri and I are genuinely proud to be a part of, and that's the Cornell Omnicommerce Leadership Program, an immersive, on-campus executive education experience at Cornell University in beautiful Ithaca, New York, happening July 27th through the 31st. This isn't a webinar. This isn't another online certificate you do in your pajamas. This is 5 days on the Cornell campus, surrounded by senior executives from retail, CPG, and ad tech service providers, all wrestling with the same questions you are. How do I win the omni shopper? How do I navigate retail media? What does agentic commerce mean for my business? The faculty lineup is extraordinary. We're talking Cornell professors alongside practitioners from Mars Snacking, Nestle, Walmart, Ahold Delhaize, Fetch, Dollar General, Monster Energy, Bayer Consumer Health, and yes, Shri and I will be right there in the room with you. You walk away with a Cornell SC Johnson College of Business certificate, 36 professional development hours, and, more importantly, a concrete omni-commerce roadmap you can bring back to your organization on day one. Seats are very limited. The program is built for VPs, directors, and senior leaders who are serious about getting ahead of where commerce is going. Visit the link in our show notes to learn more and request information. Search online for Cornell Omnicommerce Leadership or find the direct link at cpgguys.com. We'll see you in Ithaca this July. Now let's get into today's episode.
Matt Foley, the VP of Oreo, and you're listening to an episode of the CPG Guys.
Hello and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast, set at the intersection of commerce and tech. Your hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in a digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the CPG Guys podcast. I'm, of course, Sri, your co-host and also CRO and co-founder of Think Blue Consulting, your trusted partner in your omni-channel development journey, where you can get in touch with me at Sri at thinkblueconsulting.co. Please do listen to my older daughter's music at www.riaraj.com and follow Laura Raj, my younger daughter, as a member of the world's fastest growing global girls pop group Cat's Eye. They have just come off a clean sweep at the AMAs, 3 nominations, 3 awards. I got to spend time with the entire Hyde Asia team. And this episode is actually a very special one because we're going to talk about a band and a creation of a product. And I actually got to hang out with them and meet the brains behind the making of it. So I can't wait. But Peter, I'm of course joined by my co-host and co-founder, who also moonlights as head of industry and client engagement at Flywheel, the commerce acceleration division of Omnicom. Peter, at the time of release of this episode, Can would be behind us, but we got something big upcoming at Cornell with the programming on commerce media, exec ed program. Share more, man.
Well, before I do that, I'll mention of one of the reasons this episode is important to me. It has reminded me that I need to stop by the grocery store and pick something up for our dear friend Jackie Danowski, co-host of the She Commerce podcast with our friend Christina Marinucci. Do you know what those items are, Sri? Do you know what her delicacy is, being a gluten intolerant person? Do you know what she asked me to stop by?
Wait a minute, Peter. Doesn't her podcast partner work for the company we're going to talk to today?
She does indeed.
Isn't she like an insights captain?
She is. She asked me to procure for her as many different flavors of gluten-free Oreos as I could get my hands on. So I think I have one suitcase that's just devoted to gluten-free Oreo cookies. But that's
I'm
my thing.
nothing against people who can't have gluten. I mean, if you have celiac, you have an issue, you can't have it. But a real Oreo cookie should be enjoyed with wheat flour. I'm sorry.
I don't know. You know what? It just opens the brand up to so many more people. We'll take that somewhere else. But
I'm not
Shri,
disagreeing.
Actually,
I'm not disagreeing.
Okay. So Shri, the other thing you mentioned is you and I are getting excited. We're heading to upstate New York at the end of July. First, we're going to head to the Baseball Hall of Fame to go to the induction ceremony. I think there are 2 people.
That's
Andrew
like a
Jones
bucket list moment, man. I'm like so excited.
Big event. I've been up 7 or 8 times, but this will be your first, so it'll be a good time. And then, of course, we're off to Cornell University, where we will be teaching The Omnicommerce Leadership Program. This is the second year we've been working with Cornell and developing an educational curriculum. We've got about 80 of the most senior leaders in retail media, commerce, advertising ecosystem. It's going to be a fantastic 5 days in beautiful Ithaca in the summer. It's phenomenal, Sri. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Peter. And to our audience, make sure you're subscribing to our podcast on your personal listening platform, where you can get our latest episodes and go back and consume some of the 600, I'm not joking, 600 plus episodes we've already published. Of course, you did listen to our Fortune 500 C-Suite series, didn't you, which featured CEOs, CCOs, CMOs, CGOs, and so much more. If not, follow the tale of the last 10 odd episodes, late May to end June. Episode 600, of course, was the Chief Marketing Officer of none other than Dollar General, Tony Rogers himself. And now let's move on to this episode on our guest. Let me tell you something, folks. Walking into the studio today and seeing the sheer scale of what Mondelez is doing right now globally, it's an absolute madness. A little secret I'm going to give away today. Every year, Peter and I get to go to CAGNY and watch the senior most leaders, CEOs, and CFOs present the outlook for the year. Peter, do you want to share what happens right after the Mondelez presentation? What do you do every year?
Well, you and I go outside. We grab a couple of shopping bags that are on display, and the swarm of locusts that go after the table of all the treats that they've put out for everybody. There's kicking, there's shoving, there are children involved. Hopefully I don't hurt many of them, but it is one of the most iconic spectacles to witness. In fact, 2 years ago, the Wall Street Journal actually wrote a story about this particular activity that happens every year at the CAGNY conference. Sri, it is a sight to see. That's all I'm going to say.
I know it's an absolute madness, what I say. But Peter, I hope you bought your appetite for some massive cultural disruptions today, because this one is going to read out the entire CPG playbook. There's absolutely nothing better than when a legendary powerhouse brand decides to stop running ads, starts actively shaping global pop culture. Let's keep rolling, because I know you've been counting down the minutes for today's guest. Today we have an absolute blockbuster of an episode. If you've been paying attention to the retail landscape lately, you know the old way of driving brand equity is officially moving out the window. Brands are spending millions to capture cheap reach, but they're ending up completely invisible because it's missing that true authentic distinction. The question isn't about joining the conversation anymore. It's about actually driving culture and becoming an authentic part of it. To help us cut through that noise, find the signal, we're joined live by phenomenal marketing leaders steering the creative ship for some of the world's most loved snacking portfolios on the planet. He's currently the VP of marketing for none other than Oreos at Mondelez, and he is the mastermind driving groundbreaking global collaboration that has the entire industry buzzing. Fresh off their massive wins at the American Music Awards, his brand partnered with none other than global pop icons BTS. Wait a minute, did I just mention Cat's Eye? Might have just won 3 there. I got to see BTS from front row. So join us in welcoming to the CPG Guys, Matt Foley. Matt, how you doing, man? It's a pleasure to have you on the CPG Guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sure you can tell by now I was really looking forward to this episode. So
I know, and you guys are making me hungry with that story you're telling.
Matt, you can solve that for us. You know, we can always send you our address and we can have some goodies shipped out.
We're not above having merchandise sent to us.
Not at all.
We'll take care of it. We love it all. We love it all.
We're humble people, simple. In the digital liner notes of this episode, of course, we'll include links to Mondelez's corporate websites for our listeners to access while we go on with that conversation. And of course, Matt's LinkedIn profile. So I'm going to jump right in, Matt. And my first question for you is, CPG brands love to do celebrity endorsements, but usually it's slapping a face on a billboard and calling it a day or a TV ad. This Oreo and BTS partnership feels fundamentally different because it was built from the ground up. Can you take us inside the initial rooms? You know, I wish there was a fly on the wall. How do you pitch a collaboration of this magnitude internally to ensure it becomes a structural joint venture rather than a temporary marketing badge, especially since it's a K-pop band, even though I would say they are the world's largest global band, first of its nature after One Day?
So where this started was probably where you could guess. We were looking, at Oreo, we're always looking at what's next, what's going to be happening in culture as we think about a year or even 2 years ahead of us. And when we were first hearing about the BTS comeback, as so many of their fans were, we knew that was going to be a historic era in music, a huge moment that we're all experiencing right now. not just in the US, but around the world. And we thought, first off, that would be amazing, right? To be part of that. But then the next question is why? Kind of as you were getting at, and how do you do this in a way that's not just slapping a logo onto something or forcing a partnership, but finding something really authentic. And as we started to do a little bit of digging and understanding of BTS and the connection or potential connection with Oreo, we found out pretty quickly that this is actually a really popular snack for them today. And it was also for many of the band members, something that they grew up eating in Korea. So when some of those stories were shared with us, it got us really excited about being able to build something truly from the ground up and get the band's involvement in it, knowing that they were already lovers of Oreo. How great would it be if they could actually put their stamp on it and get involved? So we quickly, once we knew that information, we quickly pivoted to getting excited about the cookie itself and not just the partnership and the other activities that we'll get into today, but what could we do with the cookie that would get the band excited, and that would be something they would be wanting to have when they're on tour or something they'd want to share with their friends.
Wow, that is phenomenal. I really like that.
You know what, Peter?
Matt, welcome.
I gotta ask Laura if she's actually tried one with the BTS logo on it.
I'm pretty sure she has, Shri. She's been in their company of late. I wouldn't be surprised.
I'll ask tonight and report back.
They probably brought some to the AMA Awards, right? But anyhow, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
We're very happy to have you here. Let's talk a little bit more because I think you kind of referenced it in talking about how you wanted it to be a product that they themselves would want to eat. And that really rings to product level authenticity. You didn't just change packaging, putting their faces on the outside, right? You introduced a completely unique, Haddock-inspired flavor profile and custom BTS-themed embossments right on the actual cookie itself, right on the wafer. That is just incredible. From a supply chain and R&D standpoint, I guess my question is, altering the literal stamp and the wafer formula of a multi-billion-dollar brand is no small effort, right? How did you manage those operational constraints to ensure that deep authenticity was physically baked in to the product touchpoint?
We did it the way that we always approach these partnerships with full commitment. And I think that what was different here was this is a global launch. So we have over 80 different markets around the world doing it. And that made it even more complex, as you can imagine, from an R&D standpoint, because we needed that consistency across the world. So we actually had to bring together R&D teams from multiple markets and multiple regions and work both globally and in the US to ultimately get to not just the embossments, as you referenced, and the color and other things that we want to do, but the actual cream and that cream flavor, because it was something that we hadn't done before as a brand. And a new flavor to most people at Mondelez, particularly in the US team. So just trying to understand how we could replicate that in the most appropriate way that lived up to the expectations of BTS, expectations of people that would be familiar with the flavor was a big operational challenge for sure. And I mean, I think it's a pretty fun challenge when you think about what we're doing, coming up with a great tasting cookie. So, but you can imagine it took a number of rounds, and we actually had the band directly involved from a taste standpoint. So we actually had sent various samples through and made sure that BTS themselves were happy with where this was ending up.
Matt, I got the magic question for you then. Did you actually get to spend time with the band doing tasting?
I didn't, but I'm sure people did, but I missed that opportunity, unfortunately.
I will ask that question on your behalf next time if there's a lead up. But physically baking in the authenticity, get the phrase, Matt?
Yep.
Let's talk packaging and creative content. I got to tell you, K-pop fans and the BTS army especially is arguably, I would say, the most visually observant, detail-oriented fan communities on earth, because I see that with Cat's Eye. They notice everything. You blink and they see it. To the point where I blink and the fan base has something to comment on Instagram or TikTok on my feeds. How closely did your creative teams have to collaborate directly with the band? You started describing it. You co-designed I want to jump to the packaging. You talked about the taste. And how did you ensure the digital content, which is probably one of the most important part in launching anything these days, especially a SKU, is culturally native to the fan base than a forced corporate script that's very global in nature and kind of streamlined through PR?
A few different ways on our end. I mean, the first was just getting very familiar with BTS Army. And we had folks on my end that were spending time just getting up to speed and getting into forums and seeing how they're communicating with one another, understanding different secret languages, secret messages, other aspects. There's so many out there around BTS, but picking up on as many of those nuances as we could was really important in the beginning. The next was trying to understand what kind of design world would make the most sense and resonate for this fan base and resonate for BTS themselves. And that part was really interesting because it was as much driven by BTS and Army as it was the flavor and the inspiration of the cookie being from a treat that's available in Korean street markets and kind of a street treat that you get with that hotdog flavor. So bringing those two things together is what inspired what's actually in my background here, this kind of Korean night market as being the backdrop for not just the packaging, but also if you've seen any of the assets that we've released and some of the media around it, we really wanted to create this immersive experience where it felt like we were bringing, whether they're BTS Army fans or others, immersing them into this world of BTS, but specifically into this Korean street market feel that's very vibrant, very modern and cool. And I think it resonated really well. And it's given us such a unique point of difference in the stores too, because when we show up with this, when we showed up at retail, not just the packaging, but the point of sale, it's really different than anything else that's out there. Certainly different than anything else we've done as a brand. And it's resonating really well. One of the most interesting parts of this project, though, was really on the embossments of the cookie itself. So this was not a project where we sat down in our office and decided at our headquarters what the best messages would be. This is where we went to the band and we went and looked at what the fans themselves and BTS Army was talking about, and started to identify different messages and symbols that were part of that language. And we validated that with BTS themselves. So that's why we landed on 13 different embossments that celebrates 13 years.
13.
Yeah, and there's 13 out there, which has a reference to 13 years of BTS. And then there's different, not just symbols, but there's different messages, and there's even secret messages you can create if you put together different cookies, which is something we knew would resonate well with Army. But at the end, I think between the embossments, the design, and certainly the flavor itself, we delivered something that felt very much like the fans themselves had created it to really honor BTS.
Absolutely fabulous story, man. I got a little follow-up for you. So, when I get around in the industry a lot, people know Cat's Eye, but they usually tell me it's because of their daughter or their son. What about merchants? When y'all pitched the idea of BTS, did they know it at first part, or did you have to school them that this is the next biggest phenomenon since one day?
It's a great question because it really varied by customer. Everyone seemed to know BTS, right? They just reached such massive stardom, whether you listened to them or not, you had heard of them. So that awareness was there, but understanding the relevance that they were coming back and that this was going to be a big moment, that took a little bit of education with some of our customers. But I got to say that BTS themselves did such a great job of the way they showed up in pop culture in the US, from late night TV show appearances to so many other places that they've been popping up. And then you mentioned they're at the American Music Awards. Like, there's just been one hit after the other that I feel they've been on the scene in a big way. So any hesitation or any question was removed pretty quickly. But I do think because they were out and they hadn't toured in a couple of years, it did leave a little bit of a gap. But once we educated our customers on how big of a deal this was, that the band was coming back, not just in the US, but around the world, the response was pretty good. And customers really wanted to lean in on this one with us.
All right, Matt, on virtually every single episode of this podcast, Shri and I talk about this movement from a reach economy where it's just large audiences to what social media has really taught us is it's a trust economy, right? It's creators building trust with their audience. So to win, a brand has to go beyond a simple endorsement to build genuine, unconditional brand love. When you're engaging with a passionate, hyper-connected global community like the BTS Army, what are the strict guardrails for engagement? How do you prevent the brand from looking just like a cultural tourist trying to cash in on the trend and actually something that fits right in with the authenticity of a brand like the brand equity in BTS?
I think the biggest trap that marketers run into, and I've seen this too many times, is where you're trying to create a new behavior for this audience, right? Or a new ritual that perhaps isn't native to how they're behaving today. And for us, we kept coming back to whatever we're going to do, and I'll get into some of those details in a second, whatever we're going to do with Oreo and BTS and how we want to engage this community, we're not going to be swimming upstream. You have to look at how are they engaging already? What are the things that they're getting excited about? How do they communicate with each other and even communicate with the band? And then what legitimate role could Oreo play in that versus us creating a whole new behavior or a different experience that might derail that for them or force a behavior that's just not native to the audience. So in this case, the good news with Army is there's a number of things you can look at. The one that really stood out to us that was really unique to this group is around love letters. And they're known for writing just an incredible amount of letters that the band gets today, which I think is so cool because you hear about that from decades and decades ago with artists receiving these letters from their fans. And I think Army really picked up on this behavior, but does it in a physical and in a digital format. So we thought we'd just try to amplify that, make it even more fun and exciting, and do it alongside this cookie release. And it worked out really well. So today we've got we set up this kind of campaign. It's right on the package, actually. If you flip the BTS Oreo on its side, you'll see that we've got a call to action to be part of writing a love letter to the band. And we're collecting all of these on a digital platform. And we have a couple surprises coming up as we start to get near the end of the campaign and what we're going to do with this. But we're on this mission to basically pull together the largest collection of BTS love letters ever from the fan base and make sure that the band is able to celebrate it. So that was one of the actions that we took. And it's certainly been picking up a lot of traction because, again, it's something that's already natural for that community and something they really enjoy participating in.
Peter, should the CPG guys be writing a love letter, and should we be part of the surprise? What do you?
I just want our faces on Oreo wafers, Sri. I'm a simple man. Just put my face on an Oreo, I'll be happy. But I don't know about love letters. But I love what they've done. I think that's absolutely
the love
engaging,
letter right
and
there,
it really
Peter.
does create it's an emotional connection to the fan
So the
base.
baseline is cultural respect. So let's talk about setting a new standard for CPG partnerships. As part of our C-Suite series leading to episode 600, as I mentioned, late May to late June, we sat down with Conagra's SVP of Insights, Bob Nolan, whom we had seen present at CAGNY, and he talked about the validation trap, relying on legacy focus groups, copy test scores, because brand teams to play it safe and launch boring, predictable activations as the old way. What validation metrics did you guys rely on for a disruptive play like this? I'm sure walking in you knew it's BTS, this is going to be great. But what did you rely on? Raw intuition, community behavior? Like, how did you get to the end zone saying this is the right thing to do? And how are you measuring it today?
Yeah, we certainly bypassed that validation trap when we went through this partnership. And I'd say we've done it on many others too, when we look at these big collaborations, because you can quickly find yourself making a series of rational decisions that then takes away a lot of that specialness and the kind of secret sauce around what makes the collaboration and the activation so unique. And so for us, it is very much more intuition developed when we develop the marketing plans, how we want to engage. We relied in this case heavily on, we were lucky that we had the engagement of BTS themselves, which always makes these partnerships so much more successful. So they were able to validate some of the design world, even that love letter idea that I just shared with you. These things were passed through them to make sure they felt like this is something the fan base would get excited about. And some of that was also tapping into our own networks of people. We have plenty of BTS super fans that work at Mondelez. Of course, there's a role when we get into paid media, and we have some paid media involved in this BTS partnership. Of course, we're testing that with consumers and making sure that it's effective and the messages are coming through and it's landing the right way. But most of what people are experiencing around this partnership, and I'd say many others around Oreo in the past, are going to be driven more through that intuition of thinking about the fans, thinking about what excites consumers, what excites us as people that work on that brand, and going from there.
A reminder to our audience that we're speaking today with Matt Foley, Vice President of Marketing at Mondelez, and he is in charge of the BTS partnership for Oreos. So over to you, Peter.
All right, let's pivot to driving culture versus just being a part of the conversation. On the CPG Guys, we argue that scale without distinction leads to absolute invisibility. Oreo has masterfully moved from just running standard media flights to actively participating in major cultural milestones. From your seat, how do you define the ROI of a cultural activation? How do you prove to senior leadership that driving culture ultimately moves product off the physical shelf and drives total trips?
So we do it in a few different ways. And we're very clear upfront on these partnerships of who we are targeting. In this case, of course, BTS fans, but it's broader than that. We're really focusing on the younger end of our audience. Gen Z is, broadly speaking, the kind of sweet spot for many of the collaborations that Oreo is doing that are culturally led. And the first thing that we're looking to do is measure the impact with that audience. So of course, we can do social listening and look at engagement, but we even look back because of the scale of Oreo. We'll go back and look at household penetration and see if we move the needle with these audiences during the partnerships. And we've been successful with most of them having those types of results. So that's one, is really making sure that these are not just exciting moments for the brand, but they're actually bringing in new consumers, recruiting in a key cohort for the brand, and being very clear about that upfront. The second is, and we know this from our equity work that we do regularly throughout the years, is that we like to understand, the impact that these have on cultural relevance, and many of the questions that we'll ask in our surveys around that. And we know that these partnerships will continually drive up those equity scores, really giving Oreo a strong place in consumers' minds when they think about brands that are current. In fact, one of the measures that we looked at was how Gen Z consumers are ranking brands today, and Oreo today is a top 10 Gen Z brand, not just in snacking, but alongside any brands, which is something we're really proud of. And we know that these partnerships play a big role in that along the way. And I think the last thing for us is actually there are sales metrics that are very important that are around these types of partnerships. So BTS is out there in stores across the country. It is limited time. So in a matter of weeks, we'll be, moving through all of these cookies and the way they're selling through. We look at the velocity. We look at how quickly they sell through, and we measure it almost maniacally, especially at the launch period. So for me, as soon as I have information to look at, I was just doing this with my team last week, we were looking at daily sales in our biggest customers, and then we'll transition to weekly sales rates. And we know how important the first 2 to 3 weeks are of these partnerships to indicate the excitement and energy and pull through. So also with Oreo having a history of doing collaborations over the years, we've got a lot of benchmarks we can look at. So we can look back at other partnerships that we've done, even recent ones like Selena Gomez or Marvel or Post Malone, and get an understanding of how the uptick looks and how quickly the sell-through looks on something like this relative to those other partnerships. So that's yet another way we can measure it. But it will remain an important part of the playbook for Oreo. And I think it's such it's such an exciting part of the brand because we get to continually dream up what's next. and find that next partnership or find that next opportunity that keeps the brand top of mind, but also I think keeps our consumers and fans very excited.
No doubt about it, Matt. No pun intended here, but driving total trips is a music to a merchant's ears. Get it, Matt? Get the pun. But let's talk about the details of the retail execution side. When you roll out a massive global collaboration like this, retail partners like Walmart, Target, Kroger will want to know how this will drive their specific digital and physical shelves. You've been measuring the outcomes you set on a daily basis, on a week, and then over time transition to weekly measurement. But how do you translate the massive digital fandom of an AMA winning band into a multiple AMA winning band into a tailored retail media network strategy that helps your retail buyers win their specific category goals? I'm sure you had a pretty in-depth retail media plan.
For sure. Yeah. And in this case, we built out, as you could imagine, custom retail assets as part of our initial build out for the whole program that we knew we could take to many of the customers that you just listed. And what was, it actually starts to be really successful in this with retail media, with partnerships like this. You need to be thinking about that in the very beginning so that you're negotiating properly, you're asking for the rights for pass-through and assets, because particularly when you're working with, megastars like a BTS. So all of that was built in upfront, knowing that we'd want to do something really special with our customers and be able to bring custom assets, bring, name and likeness into the retail environment in a very exciting way. And I think our customers really appreciated that. So when we go to talk to customers about something like BTS, we already had built out samples of what that journey was going to be like for the shopper when they came online and how we'd even catch them before along the way and drive them to particular retailers. So the last piece too, something that I was really proud of that my team did is we put a lot of energy and effort into understanding how we could not just win with BTS fans, like we've been talking about, but just win with general market consumers in the retail environment for this launch. And this flavor that we've talked a little bit about that's inspired, by the band and is a popular sweet treat in Korea, Hotuk. But the flavor itself is this warm brown sugar pancake that they serve on the streets in Korea. And it's just this delicious, tasty treat that is a new flavor, at least for most Americans. And we put a lot of emphasis in that in our point of sale, in our communications. So not just on the packaging itself, but if you see BTS either on a .com, on a retail site, or in store, you're going to notice that we gave the flavor itself a lot of real estate. We gave it, upwards of 40% to 50% of the impact in real estate in store to make sure that, again, whether you're a BTS fan or not, you'd be really drawn in by trying this flavor itself, because we know flavor is one of the most exciting things for Oreo and for our consumers. And that's really paid off. And we've heard it both from our customers, but also from, other consumers just with social listening that they're loving the flavor itself, regardless of BTS's involvement.
Matt, let's talk about data and the path to purchase. We keep talking to the industry about SaaSpocalypse of data fragmentation and the rise of the agentic era, where AI agents might intercept a consumer before they even look at an application. When a brand builds a deep direct-to-consumer emotional connection through music and fandom, does that emotional equity act as a defensive shield against algorithmic curation? Does genuine brand love, I guess I'm asking, make you machine immune, or what are your thoughts on that? It
definitely helps. That's for sure. I mean, the amount of organic content that's been generated since this partnership was launched has been incredible. And it's not just, it started with people finding the cookies and posting about it, but then, fans and super fans going and also taking the cookie as inspiration to recreate different things on their own. And it's, from a 3D printed version of the cookie to different charms and other things that have been made out of the Oreo cookie. And I think that content itself has garnered a ton of attention online. And that can be one example of, I think, that, real human connection intervening, because that's naturally going to feed parts of the LLM, right? Because of the amount of pickup that we're getting from a social perspective. But certainly not immune to the agentic era by any means. I think what we rely on much heavier now, and partnerships like this give us a great opportunity to do it, is you have to be very aggressive in terms of getting the message out. You have to make sure that there are plenty of opportunities for people to read about the partnership. So we do very, active press outreach, and don't assume that even just the fandoms and the organic social traction is going to be enough to drive what AI is going to pick up. So we over-index on that. You'll also see, if you go into our website, you'll find that we're putting quite a bit of information and Q&A and other details around the partnership and around how things are coming to life for the brand, so that it's easily searchable, easily readable from an agentic standpoint. But you really do have to go, I think, as many brand marketers know today, you have to go out of your way to make sure that the message is out there and go well beyond just a press release or social media activity to ensure that it's going to get picked up and easily noticed.
All right, let's talk about machine immune equity, which you've broached the surface of, Matt, already. And Peter asked you the question related to SaaS apocalypse. That is a powerful concept to think about as you build this out. But let's look out over the next, let's say, 2 odd years. Oreo has now set this incredibly high benchmark for what a deeply authentic co-created partnership looks like. To the point where I think merchants are going to challenge your competitors too for something like this. What does a commercial strategy do next when you already have set such a high bar? Are we entering an era where CPG brands behave more like entertainment studios, lifestyle platforms, rather than manufacturing companies just making SKUs and UPCs?
I don't think it's going as far as that we'd go to become an entertainment company. I do think brands have to be really dialed into fandom, fan bases, consumers, of course, to understand where the passion points are, how they can be doing something that's really going to surprise and delight the audience. And that's, as we've talked a little bit about today, I think that's what makes this really special and resonating more than just saying Oreo is working with BTS. We're not the only brand to work with BTS, but I got to say, I think we're doing it in one of the most immersive and authentic ways you could. It certainly helps when you can create a taste experience and people actually get to, indulge with the partnership itself. But I just think it comes back to some of the basics, honestly, that in that future state, you have to keep asking yourself, what is going to make the consumer excited? What are they, what's happening in their world that I can tap into naturally, and make sure that the role that your brand has is super clear. So for us at Oreo, our role is always around playfulness and bringing this boost of playfulness into people's lives. And we like to do it in a very unexpected way, right? So we take that as our starting point and then really try to understand, again, depending on the partnership, depending on the audience, what's going to be the most authentic way to intercept that audience through our brand positioning.
Matt, I get the final question today. This has been a fascinating conversation. We'd like to send our listeners home with a concrete piece of advice. There are a lot of brand managers who listen to us. They don't want to play it safe. The old days, it was run your 4 FSIs and run your national television and move on to your next brand rotation in the process. They want to stop repurposing assets. They actually want to drive culture the way you have. I think about, prior to this, I always thought that the Oreo barcode program was one of the most iconic programs bringing us into the digital age. And here you come with BTS, and I'm just blown away by all this. What's the single biggest reality check or piece of blind spot advice you can give brand managers looking to take a chance to help them modernize their partnership?
I think number one is you have to really understand the additive role that your brand can play for a partnership. All right. So that comes back to what I was just touching on, talked about Oreo's brand positioning and the playfulness that Oreo brings to consumers. And that really is at the root of our purpose, right? That we want to help people unleash play and playfulness in their lives. So number one is make sure you're anchored on that. And I know that sounds really simple, but it's kind of shocking how many times I've been in meetings or situations with different brands that I've worked on over the years where that gets pushed aside because you get so excited about the partnership and so enthralled about what's possible. Oh, we could do this. We could, you start coming up with all these different ideas before you didn't jump off from what is it that our brand brings to the table. What's that role that it plays in consumers' lives? So that's job number one, is like anchor on that. The second is show up for the consumer, right? Put yourself into, as much as you can, into the mindset of the consumer. Go back to do you really understand them? Do you know them? Have you met them? Are you interacting with them before you engage in a partnership? Don't just take, someone else's word for it. Really try to tap in directly into that fandom when particularly when you're going to be working on a partnership itself. And I think the last is you've got to accept that these aren't perfect, right? There's a lot of things that are out of your control when you're doing partnerships, particularly celebrity partnerships or bands. Things can change. Maybe, in this case, things are going fantastic. BTS has showed up in a huge way in US culture, but sometimes timing shifts or other things. I've had that happen on partnerships, right? Unforeseen things happen. And it may not all go down exactly the way or in the same sequence that you hope. So I think accept that doing any kind of big partnership is going to come with some degree of risk, some degree of uncertainty, and just be willing to kind of roll with it and keep going back to those two things about what is my brand here to do for the consumer, and do I really understand what's going to get the consumer engaged and excited and kind of getting in their mind? And if you kind of keep anchoring on those things, I think it lets you get through to the answer pretty quickly.
Well said indeed, Matt. Let me remind our listeners you can find all of our content by simply going to a web browser and typing cpgguys.com as the URL. If you or someone you know has something to contribute to this ongoing discussion on the CPG Guys, please drop us an email at reachus@cpgguys.com. That's REACHUS@cpgguys.com. To our audience, we want to say thank you for the clicks, likes, comments, DMs, meeting us at trade shows, coming to our events, recording episodes with us, and to our sponsors. We're always grateful for you because the show doesn't exist without all of you. You work with us all year. We're grateful to have you as our audience and partners. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm still in disbelief. I left a full-time corporate career to be a B2B influencer near full-time. Peter, it's a pleasure doing this episode with you, but I want to hear your big takeaway on cultural authenticity and branding.
Shri, you use the large language models as I do to help with a lot of the prose that we produce for LinkedIn and emails and things like that. And whenever I ask an application like Claude to do that, all too frequently it spits back some language that involves the word masterclass, and I always disregard it because I'm not going to use that word. This was a masterclass, actually. Shri, I think about Christmas time, right? Right after Thanksgiving, you walk down the cereal aisle, and sure enough, one of the cereal companies has done a licensing deal with one of the big movies, Rudolph or Elf or something like that. And that's kind of like the extent of it. That's really phoning it in. What I heard from Matt today is just a completely immersive approach to taking the brand equity of their partner BTS and the brand equity that Oreo has produced and what it's known for, and set the bar so high and is really elevating the level of engagement that the consumers, and is building equity for both brands. This was just an absolute masterclass in how to bring this to life to the benefit of both brands in this equation. I was really impressed about our conversation. Sure.
Peter, for me, this is very simple. It's BTS. I mean, do I need to really say more? Like, coming from the K-pop world myself, I'm deeply immersed in the BTS army also because of Cat's Eye. I know the hype Korean people. I know the hype USA people. This partnership is a little bit iconic and I would say epic. For those that don't understand it well enough, you've probably heard it on the show. And now as a merchant, you should be motivated to want to partner again with Oreos, maybe on the next thing, the next cultural phenomenon. That's what I'd say. So, Matt, I want to thank you for doing what you did, which is create this iconic product with the band BTS, and then for joining us on this episode of the CPG Guys. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me.
That's all we have for you today. We look forward to you joining us on the next episode of the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.